I think the most interesting concept I've seen about the character of the Joker, and that's any Joker we've seen on film or television, is the idea of emergence. Emergence as a formal concept describes, quote, distinct patterns and behaviours that can arise out of complex systems, the form of simplicity emerging from complexity, end quote. So the idea is that the Joker is an emergent property of the sick society that he belongs to. The alienation, the loneliness, the lack of connection, the selective application of laws, the lies that his society tells itself. And that, because of this, you shouldn't do an origin story for the Joker, because then you have to explore the ideas of how a man could turn into this. An awful man is a product of an awful society, so in his origin you have to face these things, look at them directly, accept that the problems exist. And I think this applies both in universe and also on a meta level to a society that would create this character in a fictional world. And that makes the success of the first Joker movie a bit of a problem, because if you make a movie about a guy who's alienated and lonely and fantasizes about doing things he shouldn't and then does those things anyway, and that movie makes $1 billion, what does that say about our society? What are the distinct patterns and behaviours that led to Joker 1, made on a budget of $55 million, gross over $1 billion and become the biggest R-rated movie of all time? Does our modern society display the factors of alienation, loneliness, violence and broken relationships that the movie does in universe? Did all these things strike a chord with the movie-going public? And if not, make them sympathise with Arthur Fleck, at least make him an understandable and compelling character to the viewing audience. These kind of questions are a problem for Hollywood, because a movie that makes $1 billion is absolutely getting a sequel. The financial incentive is just too big. But looking creatively at the ideas to continue the story is just too uncomfortable, especially for an industry that's so politically homogenous. So I think that that's the contradiction that led to Joker 2 being such a creative and financial disaster. A $200 million movie that takes place in really only 2 locations, that hates its central character, that has a woefully underwritten central relationship, and ignores all the things that made Arthur Fleck into the Joker. All the basics are still there to go further into the story from the first film. The political stuff, the idea of the sick society that made Fleck into the Joker is there, but it's purely used to point out the dichotomy between Fleck and the Joker, to say that no one likes Fleck, they just want the character he created. So why do they want him to be the Joker? Why are there such huge crowds outside the courtroom? The film doesn't want to explore these questions, it just wants us to concentrate on Fleck himself. And this is, I think, why we're physically stuck in the prison location for most of the movie. To leave the prison or the courtroom for any length of time, to step outside the artificial world of the legal process, would force examination of why Fleck and the Joker is so popular. The political and societal aspects of the story therefore exist purely as background for the personal. This feels dishonest, and I think it's why the movie doesn't work. I guess there's some alternate universe where this is the second movie of a trilogy, so this is like the quiet movie in the violence sandwich. But that's already screwed on the Batman angle, and the ending of the movie makes it clear that that's not the case. They just wanted to ruin the character because the success of the first movie seems to scare them. The message we're supposed to take away seems to be Arthur Fleck is a loser, we shouldn't have any sympathy or understanding for him or for anyone else who has similar problems. This fundamental dishonesty makes everything underdeveloped, makes it all surface level. It doesn't ground anything at all. Take, for example, Lady Gaga. I don't really have any criticism of her as such, because there's nothing much for her to do there. She's great in the musical performances. We learn that her character is a charlatan who is manipulating the Joker for her own ends. In a way that's typical of modern Hollywood, we don't get to see her do that. We just get told that she's a charlatan, and we're supposed to accept it without evidence. I guess if you investigated why the character is so interested in Arthur Fleck, you'd have to start investigating why Fleck and the Joker is so popular with the wider society, and as I've already mentioned, the film isn't interested in those questions. It just wants to exploit that as background. It's not that everything is awful. Brendan Gleeson as the main prison guard that Fleck's deal with is great, as Brendan Gleeson is always great. The prison is believably sleazy and unpleasant and corrupt. Some bits of the movie are obvious fantasy, and other bits are framed and directed in such a way that you're invited to make up your own minds about whether they're really happening, which I found really interesting. The musical numbers occasionally make sense in the fantasy context. At other times, they're overdone and ridiculous. The art direction looks great. What we do see of the city of Gotham is a believable 21st century developed world, underfunded, falling apart city. The costumes, the hair, the constant smoking. There's this very 21st century of vibe of people who are just tired of what they do, tired of what they say, tired of themselves. This is a nice contrast to the bright primary coloured fantasy sequences, to the Joker makeup. So in terms of details, there are some nice things, but it's all overpowered by the contradiction at the core of the movie. Having successfully made Joker 1, it seems everybody involved was too scared to properly dig into Joker 2. So we're left with this half-formed, half-baked attempt to deconstruct the character from the first movie. I guess Joker 2 will end up like The Flash, or The Marvels, or The Last Jedi, or The Rise of Skywalker. Some absolute pointless disaster that the people involved are going to spend the rest of their careers running away from. I look forward to the interviews with cast and crew in a few years where we find out what actually happened. But for the moment, if you have seen it, I guess I'm sorry. If you haven't seen it, I'd say don't bother, just rewatch 1 and imagine the story end there. Thanks for watching.